Hi, I'm Carly from Engaging Networks. Really appreciate y'all joining us today. Uh, we are super excited about this webinar. This is a topic we are asked about a lot. At Engaging Networks, we've had a lot of new healthcare clients and a lot of folks who are reaching out to us looking for potential new tools as a healthcare organization, as an organization that has, a grateful patient component, asking us about, maybe some ways that their tech isn't working or how they can kind of align their tech to their strategy. So this is very timely for us, and it's always timely for our friends over at Doing Good Digital. So I'm really happy that Paul and Darcy are going to join us as one of our partner organizations. Doing Good Digital has helped a ton of clients, including a lot of Engaging Networks clients, implement really successful, sustainable digital grateful patient programs. They've started from clients who already had something and made it better. They've helped clients kind of start from scratch and really get their data in a place to run these types of programs. So excited to hear from them and learn a little bit more. Hopefully, y'all are able to learn some things today too. A little bit of housekeeping. We are going to use, feel free to use the chat or the Q&A function. We're going to try to have some time at the end for questions, but anything we don't cover here, we are always happy to chat. And then we will send a recording around after. So with that, I'll turn it over to Paul and Darcy.
Great. Thanks, Carly. Hi, everyone. Paul Thénange here, co-founder and CEO at Doing Good Digital. Really happy to be here today. Yeah, like Carly mentioned, we've been implementing Grateful Patient programs for probably the last 5 years now. We work with some of the best hospitals across the US, along with some of the Woodmark Children's Hospitals, and even some rural hospital systems. So yeah, really happy. It's something we specialize in. About 80% of our work is in the healthcare and hospital sector. And then in addition, we do a lot of Engaging Networks work as well. So really excited to talk about both the partnership between Engaging Networks and how it can help with your digital grateful patient program. So I will pass it over to Darcy, who will be joining me today.
Thanks. I'm Darcy Hoffman. I'm the Director of Technology Solutions at Doing Good Digital. I work in Engaging Networks and other tools to power digital fundraising programs like Digital Grateful Patient. So I'm excited to be here.
Great. So we will dive in. So here's the agenda for today. We're going to be covering everything from why a Grateful Patient program is important all the way through to content, the journey. We'll have some time for some question and answer period at the end. One thing I wanted to mention, if you have a Grateful Patient program or if you're looking to improve your Grateful Patient program, probably the best section for you is probably that content and engagement section. So if you have one in place today, don't feel like this isn't for you. Hopefully you can stick around and see that section because we'll talk about how to really engage your constituents throughout the length of their journey to really make sure you're making the most of all of your efforts.
And this is a resource that we created. It's our Digital Grateful Patient Program Guide. It will be in the follow-up resources, but it's a really good resource. Contains information about goals, data mapping, content for executing Grateful Patient programs. But again, it will be in the follow-up resources. So if you don't catch the QR code now, you'll get you'll get it. Don't worry.
All right, cool. So let's get in. So wanted to start with the why. So what's the point of a digital grateful patient program to begin with? First comment I wanted to mention is it's really about it's more than just revenue. I think is my overall take from this slide. I think everyone thinks there's one sort of silver bullet to grow revenue at your hospital. This is going to be one of the many tools in your quiver in your system to hopefully grow revenue. But in our opinion, a digital grateful patient program is more than just revenue, and there's a few other benefits here we want to talk about. Number one is really building your email list. And yes, building your email list does eventually lead to revenue, and we'll talk about that further on today. Secondly, it allows you to have a wider reach than direct mail. I mean, your direct mail program is often just due to the cost, you're limited how much direct mail you can send. Thirdly, gain patient stories. A digital grateful patient program is a great way to identify potential ambassadors and people that you can feature in videos, in stories, in future content to really continue to engage your audience. provider appreciation. This is a good one. We had one small rural hospital we worked with in the Midwest, and they said to us that the launching of the program really helped build the bridge with a lot of their providers, and also helped build awareness for a lot of the work that they were doing on the foundation side. So some really big benefits there. Um, Boosting engagement in other channels, and I think this is something that's really important, and we'll talk about this later on today as well. Digital can really be the foundation to your entire program, to plan giving, to mid-level giving, to major giving. All of the donors and constituents and the families of those individuals, they're all online. And by initiating and starting a digital grateful patient program and communicating with these people more often, it really allows you to build awareness to get those conversions in those other channels. And lastly, for some clients and some hospitals, it's sometimes the only acquisition channel. So for some of our non-hospital clients and some of our children's hospital clients, we get to do a lot of other types of acquisition, whether it's through paid media, lead magnets, downloads, surveys, all of these types of things. That's a great way to grow the list. But for hospitals, just because of the dynamic with the marketing side of the organization, there's not always a way for us to. Sometimes patients are our only channel of acquisition. So that's our case for the why today. One thing I wanted to mention, I forgot to mention on the last slide, is we're saying grateful patient a lot today, but there might be some children's hospitals that are on the phone today or on the webinar today. So this is also like grateful families as well. So grateful patients, we're talking about emailing patients who recently visit the hospital. For grateful families, for children's hospitals, we're obviously talking about reaching out to the guarantors and families of the patients of the hospital. So what is a digital grateful patient program? As I mentioned, it's the start of a relationship. Typically, it involves 2 to 3 emails sending 2 to 3 emails recently after a patient visits the hospital. These emails hopefully go out within 30 days of a patient visiting the hospital. In these emails, the calls to action can be any of the 4 that we have here. They can be send a message to your provider. They can be asking the patient to submit a story. They can be seeking other types of engagement, which I'll show in a moment, or of course, asking for a donation. But the reason we're not just focused solely on the donation in this list is because engagement is really a key metric. So this is one thing I want to just mention is we know of some hospitals, and there might be some on the phone today, where they have a grateful patient program, or they have a digital grateful patient program. But that program consists of sending 2 to 3 emails out right after a patient visits the hospital. But then for those patients that don't donate, those people are just suppressed from all future communication. So the issue with that is if you've got 10,000 emails that you're sending out at the end of each month, and only 2 or 3 people donate, we're missing that other like 9,997 potential patients that might donate in some point in the future. So our successful clients, their strategy is really having and building engagement over the long term. So not just focusing on getting that donation in the first 2 or 3 emails, because that response rate will be much lower than your typical response rate for a digital campaign. It's more focused on engagement. And the more people that we can engage in those initial emails, the longer we can keep them in the list. And then eventually, yes, if people are not engaging, clicking, doing anything with the emails, at some point, we do recommend suppressing those people in 6 months or 12 months, depending on your goals. I'll pass it over to Darcy for this slide.
Yeah, so Paul was saying engagement rates are key to this program. So when you're thinking about things you want to track, that'll include email click rates, any action rates for completing any surveys or sharing patient stories. One thing we ask a lot of our clients we work with is to use an email validation tool for their list to make sure they're sending to good addresses. And one example is Kickbox. So really recommend looking at that as making sure your acquisition programs don't affect your overall email deliverability. I could do a whole separate webinar about that specifically, but there are some resources, some validation programs, including Kickbox and some other like good email programs that you can use to pretty cheaply check those addresses and that they're good before you import them into Engaging Networks. Another thing you want to think about is when a patient converts to a donor, it may be in the series, like Paul was saying, or it might be responding to another solicitation. So checking your tracking and in your data to see if make sure that you're tracking those who donate and if they did go through your Grateful Patient program, because you should count that as a Grateful Patient donor. And you want to extend the contact beyond the welcome email addresses and keep those who engage in your file. Like Paul was saying, you can also use that list as direct mail or other automations based on actions. So digital first strategy, but a lot of opportunities with this list to move to different journeys based on what they act upon in the series.
And we're going to talk. I've got a diagram in just a moment to talk about like what that journey looks like at the very start, those first couple of emails, and then no longer journey. So we'll get into that. I did want to also talk about audience. So in terms of determining what the audience should be for your digital Grateful Patient program. First off, obviously, our audience for digital can be much larger than our direct mail audience. I will say that if you have a direct mail acquisition program in place right now, that is sort of the first place you could start for your digital audience. But I would take that, or our clients who are successful, they sort of take that criteria and they expand it. So they expand it either a little bit younger, they expand the wealth screening out a little bit. They might even expand the service lines out a little bit. They don't always loosen all of the suppressions. Certainly, we want to still keep certain suppressions in place, like deceased or insurance types or specific service lines, like behavioral health. But we do recommend going outside of the traditional direct mail segmentation and really going wide. You will see some crossover. Obviously, if you do have a direct mail acquisition program in place right now, we will have a segment of your population that's getting both communication. Totally fine. In that case, we want to make sure that the content is aligned and they're not getting two separate pieces of messages or communication in two separate channels. We did mention data and just going back to this for a second, and again, it'll be in the follow-up, so you don't need to use the QR code. But we do talk about the data strategy. We could do and if you all asked for it, I guess we could do a whole other webinar on the data flow strategy for the Grateful Patient program, on how the data moves from Epic, your EHR, to maybe some sort of list management tool into Engaging Networks, and how that whole process works. We are able to consult on that. Certainly, if you'd like to line up a call, we can also talk to you about that. But we won't be covering that today. There are some details on that in this document, so feel free to check that out. So once we have identified the audience, we've mapped the data on how it's going to go from your EHR to your research or your prospect research platform into Engaging Networks, how you're deduping it with existing donors. Once you've mapped that whole process out, what is the content and the digital strategy for your digital Grateful Patient program? So I kind of want y'all to think about it in two separate sections. So the top section here, we have like that initial series. So the patient batch comes in, and then we strongly recommend anywhere from 2 to 4 email appeals that go out to your audience. These email appeals should go out within 30 days of a patient visiting the hospital or a patient family visiting the hospital. And then that should be the initial email that goes out. And then there should be an automation that is set up in Engaging Networks for the next 2 to 3 emails, depending on your strategy. Um, in this case, we have like 2 separate blue boxes that are going out because we did want to talk a little bit about segmentation. There's a few ways you could consider to segment those initial emails that go out. First could be based on the location of the donor, or if you're a larger system and you have different regions or different hospitals, you could certainly have different content for each of those. So that would make sense. We have so many clients that like out of the gate, they're like, we want to segment by service line. But we actually haven't done that yet. Certainly open to trying it. I think there eventually becomes hesitation because we don't necessarily need to. There's not always I think there's more privacy concerns to talk to patients about a very specific recent experience. We kind of do like to keep it general, but you could segment by service line if you wanted to. Um, Also, there you could segment by direct mail versus non-direct mail. So lots of ways to segment, and something like a platform like Engage Networks really allows you to set up that segmentation and that automation. So after the first 2 or 3 emails, ideally we're getting a donor. And for those donors that make a donation, we would want to send them through an automated donor welcome series. So again, welcoming them to the foundation, thanking them for their donation. For all of those patients, and this is on the right side of this diagram, so all of the patients that maybe click or take an action, but they don't donate, we want to make sure we keep them in the file. And then so at that point, we would send them down just into our regular sort of engagement track. So, and when we say engagement track, we're just talking about your typical, your ongoing content that you're sending out to your constituents, whether it be e-news, blog posts, impact summaries, all of that great content of which we have examples in just a moment. But again, sort of going back to this point of we're not going to get a lot of conversions up top in this diagram. So we really need the focus to be down below. And the reason that is if we continue to engage all of these non-converting patients, it really allows us to build up this much larger email list. And then when we get to Giving Tuesday or we get to end of year, or if there's some sort of like external event in the community or news event, we've all of a sudden got a big email list to go after and get that conversion. So that's really our goal. And then, as we mentioned earlier, if we have, we do want to track engagement as part of this. So in Engaging Networks, we're able to track engagement. And at some point, we would want to suppress patients that are absolutely not engaging or clicking. An engagement definition might be different per customer, but we would want to suppress what people that are not taking any action within 6 or 12 months. And the reason we do this is just mainly based on the fact that we want to make sure we're preserving your email sender scores, preserving your spam rating. So we kind of want to just get rid of those people that are just not taking any sort of action. And then we're really left with this like really strong engaged audience. And that's our goal. And when we have this engaged audience, then it's a matter of really monetizing that audience through additional communication. So I'm going to talk about these are just some examples of how to engage the audience in the first 3 emails that go out. But then we have some examples in a few minutes of just how to continue to engage your audience after the initial 2 to 3 emails. So in the first couple of emails, and this is an example from one of our clients in the East Coast, we have an interactive message board that goes out. So it's really an email goes out, welcoming them to the organization, thanking them for trusting us with their care, and then driving them to an interactive message board where they can leave a message, they can see the message fly across the screen, and really engage with the organization. So, and the nice thing about Engaging Networks, it does have the ability for us to build sort of custom pages, custom landing pages. So we can really go above and beyond just a typical like, button in an email. We can really drive people to a landing page to give them a more robust experience. Another way to engage the audience is offering people the opportunity to send a note of gratitude, to thank your provider, send a card. Certainly, you'll have to work offline to try to figure out how to fulfill some of this stuff, or we're happy to come up with some creative ways how to fulfill this stuff digitally. Actually, side note, we are doing a little bit of AI agent work. So now that I'm thinking about it, we could also maybe build some agents to fulfill some of this, some of these cards in the background. But anyways, sending them to a landing page, we could have a beautiful design and a great way to send messages and notes of gratitude to providers. And just thirdly, and again, I don't have examples of a donation form in these first three emails. Yes, I think in your initial emails that go out, make sure there's a donate button. Make your case for support. Let people know how they can donate. But I think everyone knows how to do that. But I think what we're trying to say is, in addition to some of that CTA, we want to have other ways for people to engage, because we're only going to capture a smaller number of donors. So again, this is just a third option here, where how can you drive your constituents to a web page or a place where there's more ways for them to take action?
And the Grateful Patient series is a great avenue for testing different ideas, and it's really easy to set up a split test in the Engaging Networks automation tool. I recommend testing one element at a time, and there's some examples here of different things you can test in your email series. But you want to be able to tell that any changes in engagement were from that one element that was changed. You'll measure the differences in clicks, actions, and donations from your testing. And it's just a really great opportunity to tweak the emails and optimize your sends. As we have most of the Grateful Patient series that go out usually monthly. So you're sending them over and over and seeing that test results over time is a really good opportunity to update and optimize those email sends.
Yeah, and I think, and a couple of additional notes on this slide is, as you're optimizing your email sends or emails that are going out, there's a few things you could optimize for. So we could optimize certainly for donations. We could optimize certainly for clicks. We could optimize for the actions that we want people to take. So you could test in addition to, we could also test different content. So we definitely recommend, once you implement your Grateful Patient program, it's just important to constantly be tweaking, leveraging a tool like Engaging Networks to ensure that we're constantly optimizing the emails that are going out. A lot of words in this slide, apologize. But yeah, first point, yes, I think I won't hammer this point anymore, but real talk, you won't get a lot of conversions from the initial series. So I think this is our whole message today. It's really about how do we leverage a platform like Engaging Networks to really ensure that we're constantly building a relationship with our constituents over the long term. So yes, let's implement that first digital email series, but let's ensure that once those donors go through that series, we continue to engage them. And what does that engagement look like for the rest of the journey? So we've done it a few different ways with a number of different clients. One client decided to actually have two sets of automation. So the initial series was a 3 email automated journey. And then based on the individuals, if they did click or they did not click, we sent them another 6 emails in an automated series to that constituent group. So that could be something you set up. Although we haven't seen as many people do that. And that's definitely more complicated. And I would say maybe do that if you have a very large audience. Otherwise, I'd recommend once they go through that initial series, keeping them in your engaging networks, like we talked about, and just keeping them in an acquisition segment. So you want to label all of these individuals as your acquisition group. And we want to ensure that we continue to communicate with this acquisition group throughout the year. And I've got some examples coming up on the next slide. So this can be through surveys, additional stewardship pieces, anything really to inspire engagement. And I think I get it. It's hard. We work with a lot of hospitals. And I think yes, the content approval process is sometimes the whole thing. And I think it does hold us back. And yeah, I mean, what are we going to do? We're all stuck sometimes with these content approval processes. But I think we still need to push as hard as possible to try to get out as much non-solicitation as we really can. Because we want to make sure when we look back at the year, we want to make sure our relationships are they look like it's give, 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 then we're asking. So it's how are we giving lots of value throughout the year so we make that ask? It really has a meaning and we get some conversions. And then the last point of the slide I wanted to mention was just it's really important to track the success of your indirect donations. So when we report on all of our programs, we report on other channels as well to see how have other channels been impacted since we implemented the program. And one of our bigger clients on the East Coast, through their direct donations and indirect donations, now their Grateful Patient program, we're able to attribute $1.5 million in revenue to all of the efforts that we've been doing for that organization. And this goes back to what I said on one of my earlier slides of these emails are going to be seen by major donors, families of major donors, by mid-level donors, their families. You'll be getting in front of planned giving prospects earlier in the journey. Typically, I mean, planned giving emails might go out 2 to 3 times per year, and they're only going out to your existing donor base. But now we're getting some of that content out they're getting in touch with some of these prospects much earlier in there than you typically would. So I really encourage you all to have put a process in place to make sure that you are tracking some of these indirect donations. So how do we keep that journey going? So what are some other ways? Monthly content examples. We definitely recommend a monthly e-newsletter. If you're oh my gosh, how do we get a monthly e-newsletter together? Maybe keep it short. Can we, instead of having 4 stories that go out every month or every quarter, maybe we do 1 story per month. So just try to find ways to maybe share content more often. Leverage blog posts from the hospital. If you have infographics from your annual reports, we really encourage coming up with different types of media. So we've seen success with clients where we've got an e-newsletter that goes out, then halfway through the month, we've got a video from a caregiver that goes out. So really trying to just vary up the media and keeping impact front and center. You could also leverage strategies through engaging networks like conditional newsletters. So for one client, for the newsletters that go out, we actually have conditional content based on the segment. So if it's the acquisition segment, the first story in the e-newsletter is a survey or a quiz. So our whole goal is to get that acquisition segment to take an action. Whereas for the rest of the people in the file, the first story is a regular story about impact or care. So we can really leverage the tools within Engaging Networks to have some conditional content. One other tidbit, which is related to this, would be for maybe your mid-level or your major or even your monthly file. You could have conditional content through Engaging Networks for that audience. So for example, maybe your major donors, you have a little conditional story, which is come visit us for a tour. We wouldn't want that to go out to your whole file, but maybe for a select group of prospects or major donors, we'd love to include that in the newsletter. And so just examples of some of the other ways that our clients are engaging their constituents. On the right-hand side, Intermountain Foundation in Utah. This is just a nice, simple campaign that we use to engage the acquisition audience to submit a message to their patients that are in the hospital. Something like this, I mean, if you develop something like this, it can be used again to engage your acquisition audience, but it could also be used if you are able to get approval for any sort of paid media promotion or any organic social. You can also get this on social media. Great way to hopefully build your email file that way. Some other fun and unique ideas that we've come up with on the left-hand side, we've come up with, we're calling it like a Spotify. It's like similar to a Spotify Wrapped campaign. It's like we call it Your Impact. And so a way to really, and this is more for donors once they do make even a $25 donation. How can you at the end of the year show them how their money made a difference? And so we could include that as conditional content in an email through Engaging Networks, showing the amount they've given, showing different badges they may have earned throughout the year, or we can drive them to a landing page. On the right-hand side, for Joslin Diabetes, who's now part of BILH, this was our survey strategy that I just mentioned a little bit earlier. So again, for that acquisition audience, once they get through that initial 3 emails, we want them to click. We want them to be like, yes, I'm here, I am engaged. So having maybe a survey as the first story in an e-newsletter for that audience is a great way to do that. Or you could include this in all of your communication, or excuse me, you can include this as going out to all of your donors and constituents. The middle one on the right is a typical survey, which we like to do. So my Zoom is hiding the actual text here. What do you want to learn more about? Or and in this example, we've got patient care, research, education, or all of the above. So in addition to the benefits to just your acquisition file, by asking these sort of questions through Engaging Networks to your entire file, you can really start to tailor and personalize content based on what someone is selecting. And in this case, it's very general, like patient care, research, education. It could be more specific, like cancer research, heart care, something like that. This is not one of our clients, but I did see this come across my email the other day, and I thought it was very valuable and certainly something that we could build in Engaging Networks. But this was a great way for, this is Mount Sinai in New York, and they send out a lot of quizzes and interactive stories to engage their audience. So this one here, it's actually not a quiz, but it's more of like a 4 or 5 part story. So you get the email, you click on the link, and then it takes you to a page where you sort of walk through 5 to 6 different slides, learning about the organization, learning about the story that happened. And then towards the end, you can make a gift or send a message. They also do some other similar media to this, but more like quizzes. It's like, oh, test how much you know about our COVID-19 prevention policy or something like that. And you can sort of go through and take a quiz. So again, a great way to engage your audience, that acquisition audience, and ensure you keep them in the file. And again, the last few examples were just about content. So I really wanted to challenge everyone to, and this is where we can help, obviously, it's what we do, but I really want to challenge everyone to think through what types of additional content can we come up with in addition to just the typical newsletters, in addition to just the typical appeals. We've got lots of ideas, so please let us know if you want to brainstorm any of that. But in addition to all content, we also don't want to take our eye off the ball. We are all fundraisers. We all want to make sure we are doing our job. So making sure we're getting those upgrades. So in all of this communication that's going out, making sure we're making the ask for a monthly upgrade, other DAF giving or symbolic giving, Engaging Networks really does allow us, and Darcy's going to talk more in just a moment, allow us to implement things like symbolic giving catalogs, automations for your mid-level audience, things of that nature as well. Actually, maybe I will just touch on mid-level automation just really quickly. The last 2 points. One thing we've seen some success with is for one client in Ohio, we set up an automation. So every time a donor makes a donation over $500, there's an automated email that goes out from one of their, I think there's not sure how many gift officers there are, let's just say 10, one of their 10 gift officers that goes to that individual, thanking them for their donation, asking them for a meeting, and it kind of just automates that initial touch point from a major gift officer. So I think this is where digital can really cross over into other areas of your foundation. I think a lot of the times we think of digital as just an annual fundraising tool, but really there's so many work if you can bridge the gap with your planned giving team, with your mid-level giving team, your major giving team. There's lots of ways for us to sit in a room together and come up with really unique ways to personalize and engage that audience through personalized content and automations in something like Engaging Networks. I'll pass it over to Darcy.
Yeah. So why Engaging Networks? Engaging Networks
Sorry about that.
That's okay. Has all of the features and the flexibility you need to set up your Grateful Patient automation. There are drag and drop email editor, segmentation and profiles for setting up your audience. We're talking about conditional content to personalize sends, and then tracking the performance of your program. And there can be a lot of moving parts in a Grateful Patient program, but doing it in Engaging Networks is really easy to set it up, to do testing, and to optimize your program for your audience, for your donors. Then peer-to-peer and events. This gives another way for your Grateful Patient audience to interact with your organization. One thing we promote a lot in these programs is becoming a DIY fundraiser and using toolkits to share their story on their page and also on social media and elsewhere. So having that in Engaging Networks and seeing that all that tracked together is really impactful and can be really easy to see how they moved from your Grateful Patient to peer-to-peer. So really recommend including that into your program and building out some of those DIY events, and then just in general, the events that your organization holds, sending those events out through Engaging Networks as well.
And one last final point is we did want to mention, and we like working with Engaging Networks because it does allow us to integrate with other platforms. And one platform we're doing a lot of work right now is Dataro, who's an AI company that essentially integrates with Razor's Edge. So for any of you that are on Razor's Edge, Dataro integrates with RE to really help with prospect research through their AI platform. But in addition to that, Dataro can use AI to identify potential audiences for donor journeys. So rather than using typical sort of like RFM segmentation to identify who's right for a mid-level upgrade or who's right for a monthly upgrade or who's at risk of churning, we can now start to use something like AI. And so Dataro can do all of this by connecting with Razor's Edge. It can identify all of these audiences on a weekly basis. We can, or you can, set up all of the automated journeys with pre-approved content in Engaging Networks in advance. And then as soon as Dataro sort of identifies this each week, we've built an integration that will kick off that integration in Engaging Networks. We're very excited about this because I just feel like typically building, like trying to visualize your like donor journeys is like a tree branches that never end. Like they make a monthly gift, then do you send them a survey? Then do you ask them for this upgrade? So eventually AI will start to do all of this. But I think a lot of us are concerned about like, oh yeah, let's let the robots write content. We don't want that yet. So I think this is the best of both worlds where we can leverage AI to identify the audiences, but we can pre-approve and write all of the content in Engaging Networks and set it up in advance, and then bring that all together. So, but the bigger message here is Engaging Networks is a very partner-friendly platform, and it does allow us to connect and work with other platforms. Guess that's it. So, final takeaways. I think the biggest takeaway, and I sort of harped on it already, is really let's just really think long term. And really, it's the second point. So let's leverage automation and personalization to really think about the long term effects that this digital grateful patient program can have on the annual program, but also in indirect contributions as well. And also through something like Engaging Networks, I think I think a lot of hospitals and even a lot of non-hospitals, the digital program is typically like, it's Doctor's Day or it's Giving Tuesday, email goes out, donation button, maybe an e-news that happens throughout the year every so often. But I think the real value through something like Engaging Networks is it's all about content. So how can we deliver more content to our constituents in a very personalized way to really influence giving over the long term? And the last point is really just change management and stakeholder involvement. I'm sure a lot of you are watching this today and like, right, how are we going to get all this done? But yeah, it is, and certainly something that we can help with is we do really recommend bringing in stakeholders from your other departments, certainly including your data folks, your prospect research folks, your IT department, bringing all of these people to get approval. We have lots of case studies and references and other hospitals you can speak with. So if you are concerned about implementing some of these things, you're not exactly blazing a trail. This has been done before, and there's other people within the industry that you can leverage to talk to. So yeah, and so with that, I think we are going to turn it over for questions.
Yeah, we've got some good questions. I'm also going to put in a quick plug for, I know you all mentioned kind of being able to push folks into like events and peer-to-peer, and we are actually in 2 weeks doing a similar webinar with one of our other partners. So if folks are interested in peer-to-peer, it's something we at Engaging Networks have invested a lot in. It's a lot used across our client base. So if folks are interested in kind of a similar session that it's on peer-to-peer strategy, I am dropping a link to that in the chat. It'll be part of the follow-up as well. But we did get some really good questions. So one of the questions, we have a couple questions around the indirect donations. So how do you define indirect donations? And then how would you recommend that folks track indirect donations?
Yeah, I can take a first stab at this one. But yeah, for us, I think there's two ways to do it. So the first is we have one client. They just go with an attribution estimate. So what they look at is their general donation form on the website during campaign times or during these grateful patient emails that are going out. And we attribute a certain percentage of those donations to the Grateful Patient Program. And then secondly, for other organizations, we do it based on so say a planned gift comes in or a major gift comes in, were we the first point of contact? So were we the first point of contact that went out to a constituent? And if we were, then we would argue that that would be a portion of that, whether it's 100% or 50% or 25%, should be attributed to the Grateful Patient Program. Darcy, any other comments on that, or did I get that one?
Yeah, and then in Engaging Networks, that could be your origin source tracking and how you're uploading the list into Engaging Networks and making sure that origin source is related to the Grateful Patient Program, and that can help your tracking there.
And so do you both define indirect donations as gifts that are made anywhere else other than that direct email series that have that origin of the acquisition source?
Yes. Yeah,
Okay.
exactly. Yeah. It's yeah, exactly.
Okay.
Um,
Oh, sorry, go ahead.
oh no, I was going to get to the next question, but you go for it. I think you're going
Yeah,
to tee it up.
there's a question around emotional storytelling. Um, someone asked that emotional storytelling of the patients our mission serves are number one motivator for an individual to make a gift. However, in my experience in the space, utilizing that same emotional storytelling targeted to a patient audience doesn't resonate the same. They aren't moved by someone else's story of impact when they have their own or that of a close family member. This person was curious if that's something you've also seen, and if there's a way you uniquely build engagement-focused outreach that's best suited for a grateful patient or grateful family audience versus general donors or supporters.
Mhm. Yeah, no, it's a great question. I would still say that most of our clients still focus on emotional storytelling to both audiences. Um, I would say the biggest difference in the communication strategy is just based on with the acquisition audience, just focusing a little bit more on getting some sort of engagement to keep them in the file. So when you're thinking about your segments throughout the year, just focusing on maybe having slightly more surveys or clickable content in the emails that are going out to the acquisition audience versus the donor audience. Um, and I still think and maybe a follow up or another idea for you, um, and related to surveys is I would ask the donor or ask the patients what they're most interested in. So sort of going back to one of my earlier slides, um, is just if we have the surveys going out, are they most interested in care, research, education, patient stories? If we can find that out from those patients, then start to segment the content that way.
I think too, that would be a really good test for you to test to see if we put in an emotional story versus we put in more education and resources, do we get more responses that way? So I think that could be a really good test for your organization just to see what performs better, because you will go through a process of creating content, but it doesn't have, and I would recommend it not be evergreen. You can change it up occasionally and see optimize it to see what performs better for your foundation.
Thanks, Darcy. Someone also asked about, you all mentioned symbolic giving as part of kind of the not just straightforward donation as call to action. This person asked about it. I know what we mean in engaging others when we say symbolic giving, but I'm curious for you both kind of how you've seen clients leverage the symbolic giving tool.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, symbolic giving is essentially when we are um, asking people to make a gift towards something that's more symbolic, like a pet therapy session for a patient in the hospital, or a board games to the Child Life Services Center, something along those lines. Yes, and however, on the form or on the website, we would want to make sure that there is some specific language that says these are symbolic in nature. They may not necessarily go to these exact areas, although may go to a certain specific fund. Um, and we can follow up with some examples of links of these. There's a couple of different ways to do it. You could have a more like a larger symbolic giving catalog where people can sort of go in
Mhm.
at Christmas time or the holiday season or Black Friday and sort of like select 3 or 4 different gifts, send an e-card for each and check out. Or we could just do it on a donation form in Engage Networks. Sorry, Darcy, anything else to add on that?
Yeah, that's exactly it. And yeah, we've seen it both ways, like the add to cart, like e-commerce version, or just on the donation form itself. And then I've also had a client do um, not symbolic giving. It's a every gift of $15 went to give to a toy to a patient in the hospital. So, and that had a really good impact because donors wanted to make a gift and make sure a patient got that stuffed animal. So, that would be another option there too.
A few other questions. You mentioned, hey, like fair warning, conversion rates are going to be fairly low on the initial series. For folks that are kind of thinking about like a baseline for that, what would you say is kind of the baseline for what to expect for some of the
Mhm.
initial series?
I would say it's probably going to be about a quarter of what your typical campaign response rate would be. It's typically what we see. So I look at your typical response rate if it's like, 0.18 um, for each digital campaign, it's probably about a quarter of that. Um, and again, it really depends what's going on in market, the time of year. If you're sitting at a Grateful Patient series towards the end of the year, it might have a more of an impact versus the start of the year or in the summer. But yeah, it's probably about a quarter, I would say. Darcy, I don't know if you have anything more specific than that.
Yeah, that sounds about right.
Okay. There was also a question about the testing. You listed a bunch of elements that you frequently test. Is there anything in your testing that like has surprised you or that you have found like we always really like to test this element because it can be really different from organization to organization?
Um, I think one thing is buttons, changing the call to action on the buttons and testing that in particular. The one thing we also track too is which is so interesting because it varies from org to org. If your organization, your donors want to click a link versus a button, so I wouldn't say in general like this is a better, but testing for different organizations I've found is completely unique to your audience and what performs better.
Okay. I think that was the most of the questions that came through. If folks were to take away like one thing, I think you kind of had it in those final takeaways, but if you had one final message for folks as they depart and try to implement a lot of this into kind of their programs, what is your one catchy piece of advice?
Yeah, I think for me is if you are not able to get a digital Grateful Patient program or series implemented, if that's sort of too much of a lift for your organization, um, then it's all good. I think maybe start with just like how can you leverage something like Engaging Networks for the content of your existing file today. And maybe at some point down the road, when you get through privacy and all that stuff, you'll be able to set up an actual sort of initial onboarding series on Grateful Patient. But in the meantime, I think and I hope there's plenty of ways to augment the and personalize the constituent experience of your existing emails that are on file.
Awesome. Well, I think that's a good segue. As a fundraising email engagement tool, you mentioned the surveys and symbolic giving, peer-to-peer. As one of those tools, one of those tech tools to help implement this kind of strategy, um, we would love to hear from folks if you feel like, hey, we want to do the things that Darcy and Paul are talking about, but our tech isn't, we don't feel like we can with what we have, or we want a second opinion from experts who have helped other organizations make it work with the tools they have, or consider moving to something new. Or if you're like, hey, none of these systems seem to talk to one another in order to get that into, get that AI component with Razor's Edge, how can we make things like that work? We're all here and would love to talk to you. I think we dropped our contact information in there. Mine's easy. It's carly@engagingnetworks.net. We're going to be sending out the recording afterwards, so you'll have our contact information. We would love to talk with you and learn more about each of your programs, goals, challenges, pain points, also hopes and dreams, and see if we could potentially help. So really appreciate everyone joining. Darcy, Paul, thank you so much for joining and sharing your wisdom that I know is hard earned over across a lot of years and a lot of clients. Hope everyone has a wonderful day and you'll get the recording from us soon. Thank you for joining.